There's a new post on the Star Wars Leaks Reddit that has a basic outline of the Star Wars Episode 9 Rise of Skywalker plot. This post claims to have assembled all the information from multiple sources, and all of it is consistent with the footage we've seen so far from the three little trailers, or the teaser trailer thing, and the two actual trailers, Trailer 1, Trailer 2. So there's nothing in here that contradicts the actual proven information we have so far, and as we go forward towards the movie's release, we'll be able to see how much of this is actually credible. But be warned, this may all be true, so possible spoilers ahead. To begin with, I'll just highlight some of the main points before I go through it all. One of the most interesting things that this claims to be true is that Rey is the granddaughter of Palpatine. So that's what her family link is. And Palpatine is not a spirit or any kind of Force ghost, it's actually a physical Palpatine. And seemingly the movie will explain how he still exists and how he got to where he is. So these leaks don't say what exactly happened and how is Palpatine still alive after Return of the Jedi, but seemingly that is contained in the movie. The overall plot seems to be very similar to Return of the Jedi, and it seems the main thing going on is Palpatine is trying to turn Rey to the dark side with the help of Kylo Ren, which is fairly similar to the Emperor trying to turn Luke to the dark side with the help of Vader in Return of the Jedi. Now, what seemingly happens is that Kylo Ren returns to the good side and becomes Ben Solo again, and it's left a little bit vague whether or not he actually dies at the end of the movie, but he seemingly turns to the good side, I guess quite similar to how Vader turned back to the good side at the end of Return of the Jedi. So let's start at the start. What does it say here? Then I'll be quoting what the article says, so whenever it says I believe or I've heard this, it's not me, obviously, I'm just quoting what this person's actually written. So to begin with here, we've got, as stated in a previous leak, it's been reiterated to me that we will indeed be getting young Luke and Leia flashbacks. One in particular appears to be at the opening of the movie. We begin the action by seeing one off, if not the final training lesson between Luke and Leia is giving up her Jedi training due to the fact that she's pregnant with a son. We could probably presume it's Kylo Ren. My source on this mentioned a fight, so I believe that we may be getting Luke and Leia in a lightsaber duel towards the beginning of the film. Picking up in the current point in the timeline, Leia appears to have taken up the mantle of Jedi Mentor to Rey in the wake of Luke's passing. This will likely coincide with the scene from the D23 first look where Rey throws her lightsaber at a training remote and cuts down a tree. Early on in the film, we catch up with Kylo's story where he is slaughtering people with the purpose of tracking down one of the film's MacGuffins, a device known as the Wayfinder. I'm told that the clip of Kylo body slamming someone into the floor of the forest bathed in red light seen in the teaser. I'm also told that this planet is called Exegol. Don't quote me on the spelling. Kylo obtains the Wayfinder from the Oracle and finds it to contain coordinates to a point in the unknown regions. The Wayfinder that Kylo was given once belonged to his grandfather. I think we can assume they're referring to Vader, although I guess it's possible that it might be Solo's father, whoever he is. This here is a recreation of what the Oracle is supposed to look like. It's some kind of creature that's sitting on top of a giant baby head. Using the coordinates found within the Wayfinder device, Kylo arrives in the unknown regions. Here Kylo encounters Emperor Palpatine. How Palpatine is alive and how he ended up in the unknown regions is still a mystery to me that I hope to learn more about in the next few months. Note, Daisy Ridley recently said in an interview that it's explained in the film. But my source on this tells me that this is indeed Palpatine in the flesh. Kylo and Palpatine's conversation apparently centers around ordering Kylo to find Rey and bring her to the Emperor with the goal of turning her to the dark side. It says, note, it is not lost to me that this part of the story feels very Return of the Jedi inspired, but we'll just crack on and see how this all pans out. My source specifically mentioned that Palpatine is very old and decrepit at this point, possibly on the verge of death. A little bit of Googling reveals that Palpatine is thought to have been around about 113 years old at these events. His goal in alluring Kylo to him and converting Rey to darkness is more or less to have Rey and Kylo inherit the new Empire and for them to rule it together. In order to facilitate bringing about the new Empire, Palpatine has spent 30 years creating a fleet of Death Star destroyers. Note, I don't know if this is their actual name or not. They appear to be exactly what they sound like, Star Destroyers with Death Star tech mounted on them, giving them the capability to destroy a planet. According to my source, these Star Destroyers make up the Sith fleet that housed the new Red Sith Troopers, which was showcased at SDCC in July. We catch up with Finn and Poe returning to the jungle planet depicted in some of the behind-the-scenes images shown at Celebration. The duo has been in contact with an informant from within the First Order. The mole has told Finn and Poe about Kylo coming into possession of the Wayfinder. Note, it's unclear to me if anyone in the Resistance understands what the Wayfinder is or where it leads. They just want to find it. Poe and Finn tell Leia about this, and she sends Rey, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and the other droids to accompany them on the mission. In order to get them going on the quest, Leia puts them in contact with someone on Pasaana, the desert planet filmed in Jordan. It is at this point in the story where the Resistance team makes their way to the desert planet seen in the teaser and behind-the-scenes footage. It's revealed that Leia's contact is Lando Calrissian. Lando points him towards another one of the MacGuffins, a Sith artifact that apparently turns out to be a dagger. This dagger has some sort of writing on it that C-3PO can't decipher. Note, my source understands this to be a Sith language. That depiction is pretty vague to me, but the key point is sound. Heroes find dagger. Dagger has writing on it. C-3PO can't read. It's during our hero's time on Pasaana that Kylo initiates a force mind link between himself and Rey. Through their connection, Kylo discovers where Rey and the Resistance crew are and leaves to pursue them. Eventually, Kylo and the Knights of Ren arrive and begin to attack our heroes. One thing leads to another, and the Resistance crew gets outnumbered, and they're forced to make their escape on an old ship, leaving the Millennium Falcon behind. Kylo recovers the Falcon and takes it back to his Star Destroyer. As previously mentioned, 3PO is confronted with a challenge he's not equipped to handle. The artifact found on Pasaana contains a language 3PO can't translate without modifications. In order to modify 3PO's programming, Poe brings the team to the wintry planet seen in the teaser, Kijimi, per the Vanity Fair article. There, 3PO is modified to allow translation of the artifact. I'm told that the modification is done by a small alien, possibly the one pictured in an image from a post from 6 months ago. Once translated, the dagger supposedly reveals information regarding a second Wayfinder, this one having belonged to Emperor Palpatine himself, leading the team to journey to the forest moon of Endor. During the events leading to the modification of 3PO on the wintry planet, Kylo initiates another force connection between himself and Rey. Kylo supposedly uses this as an opportunity to begin forcing Rey down a path of darkness. He does this by antagonizing Rey. Kylo tells her that he knows about the dagger and what it was once used for. Kylo apparently tells her the dagger was used to murder Rey's parents. Kylo maintains that her parents are nobodies in the grand story. This angers Rey, and she lashes out at Kylo, and a lightsaber duel ensues. Rey is on Kijimi, the snow planet, and Kylo is on his Star Destroyer. According to my source, no flashes of any additional locations are seen during this fight, possibly in the film at all, but we'll see. Ren keeps the link alive long enough to learn Rey's location and eventually pursues her in his Star Destroyer like before. Zorii Bliss is introduced sometime during this time on the planet. Once Kylo arrives, a gang of heroes decide to sneak aboard and attempt to recover the Falcon prior to leaving. Now, this here's my little bit of speculation. This isn't in the article. There was a little bit of information or a little bit of leaked footage at the D23 Expo that showed the blockade runner in some sort of large bluish-greeny hangar and someone sneaking out of the blockade runner. Now, maybe that's where they've snuck on board with that ship and maybe they're sneaking out of there to capture the Falcon. That's completely my speculation. There's nothing in this article to back that up at all. So back to the article. The rescue plan goes awry, and the whole group gets captured by the First Order. It's at this point that two major things happen. It's revealed that Hux is the First Order mole that has been feeding the Resistance information, and he allows the heroes to escape while Kylo is distracted by dueling with Rey in person. During the duel, Kylo adds another wrinkle to Rey's backstory. He maintains that while her parents are nobodies, her grandparents, more specifically her grandfather, wasn't. Kylo tells Rey that she's the granddaughter of Palpatine. This explains his interest in bringing the random nobody from Jakku into the fold. The crew recover the Falcon, Rey reconnects with them, and they all flee. Following her battle aboard the Star Destroyer and escape on the Falcon, Rey uses the newly gleaned information resulting from 3PO's modification and the translation of the dagger to travel to Endor. At this time, it's a little unclear to me how Kylo gets from point A to point B, but supposedly he's waiting for Rey in Palpatine's throne room aboard the wreckage of the second Death Star. Naturally, they fight. The specifics of the duel are unknown to me, but what I've been told about is that it's at this point that Rey begins to tap into some hatred to gain the upper hand and eventually defeats Kylo. Rey leaves him for dead on the wreckage of the Death Star. Rey takes possession of Palpatine's Wayfinder and leaves. My sources tell me that the dark Rey moment seen in the D23 footage is in fact a vision, described to me as thematically similar to Luke seeing himself as Vader in the cave on Dagobah. This apparently is a short sequence that happens right after Rey picks up Palpatine's Wayfinder. While lying in the wreckage of the Death Star in a weakened state, Kylo Ren reportedly sees a vision of his father. Han tells Kylo that it's never too late to change, and when he leaves Endor, he leaves not as Kylo Ren, but as Ben Solo. This duel is a critical tipping point for Rey as well. I'm told that in the wake of her confrontation with Kylo, she takes the Wayfinder and flees to Ahch-To to collect her thoughts. Her mindset is reportedly mirror Luke's while he was there prior to and during the events of The Last Jedi. The vision of a possible dark future for herself, in conjunction with the fact that she nearly killed Kylo, scared Rey in the same way that considering killing Ben in his sleep scared Luke many years prior. She feared the path she was headed down and decides to swear up the Jedi, exiling herself to Ahch-To. Rey scuttles the ship she used to get there just like Luke did, and she caps it all off by casting Anakin's reconstructed lightsaber towards her ship. Just when it looks like the Jedi Order is going to end again, the spectre of Luke Skywalker appears to Rey, holding her discarded lightsaber, and does what all good Force ghosts do, gives our hero the resolve to do what needs to be done. Finish the work Luke began over 30 years earlier, and put an end to the Emperor for good. According to my source, Luke passes on Leia's lightsaber to Rey. Note, I don't know where it came from, where it's been all this time, or how Luke is able to give it to Rey, but I can tell you, with only about 50% confidence at this point, that Leia's blade is supposedly blue. Bolstered by a conversation with Luke, Rey takes Leia's lightsaber, transmits the location of the Sith fleet to the Resistance before heading out herself. On the subject of Force ghosts, Luke makes another appearance around the time of Rey and Kylo's crisis of faith. Back at the main Resistance base, Leia is on her deathbed. My sources describe it to me like Yoda's death in Return of the Jedi. Nothing bad happens, it was just her time to go. Luke has to come to say goodbye, but before it all ends for Leia, he has one final lesson for her. From what I've been able to put together, the final act in the film is structured like this. Rey leaves Ahch-To and travels to the Sith fleet in the unknown regions. Eventually the Resistance fleet arrives and battle ensues. However, Rey finds a way to the Emperor who has been waiting for her. Palpatine confirms that what Kylo told her was true. Apparently after his defeat on the second Death Star, Palpatine was shaken by the fact that he wasn't able to maintain his hold on Vader or seduce Luke to the darkness due to their familial bond. During the course of their conversation, Palpatine makes reference to this bond between Vader and Luke and likens it to his bond with Rey, hoping that whatever familial connection they have will be enough to win her over and become as strong as that of the Skywalkers. Note, what my source described next feels very reminiscent of Return of the Jedi. Rey is trapped in the Emperor's throne room, watching two opposing fleets battle while she helplessly gazes onwards. It's at this point that Kylo/Ben reappears. How we get to the next part is still a bit fuzzy to me, but apparently Ben and Rey join forces and begin attacking Palpatine. Leia's lightsaber comes back into play when Rey and Kylo share the Skywalker lightsabers throughout their fights. At some point, the Emperor overpowers them both and supposedly kills Ben. Note, there have been reports from other reputable leakers that Kylo sort of dies, but my source in this seems pretty unambiguous. Personally, I think we'll just have to wait and see what we learn the next few months. When it looks like all hope is lost, the ghost of Luke and Leia show up and aid Rey. Together they overpower the Emperor and end his darkness once and for all. As for what the other members of the Resistance are doing at this point, they're engaged in a space battle against the Palpatine fleet led by General Pryde. The Resistance goal is supposedly to take out the flagship, severing communications and making navigation out of the unknown regions impossible. The flagship is destroyed around the same time that the Emperor dies. The last thing I was told is regarding the final sequence of the film. I don't know why, but our heroes travel to Tatooine. During these scenes, it's supposedly revealed that Rey has cannibalized Anakin/Luke's lightsaber and Leia's to make one of her own that supposedly has a yellow/gold blade. She buries the leftover pieces on the grounds of the former Lars homestead. The final shots of the Skywalker saga allegedly echo how the adventure began in 77, our heroes gazing at the horizon, dreaming of the future as twin suns set in the distance. So that is all for that is what is contained in that article on the Star Wars Leaks subreddits. I think the end sounds pretty good, although it does seem a bit gimmicky for it to actually happen. So I think ending with the twin suns setting on Tatooine is a pretty good idea, but actually how they're going to go about explaining why they're there in the first place, I don't know how that'll work. But the actual idea of having that, I think that's a pretty good way to actually end the film. All in all, I think, well, everything here is very plausible. It is backed up by the footage we've seen so far. I think it sounds fairly good, but again, if it can be executed correctly. So there's nothing really in here that really springs out at this stage to go, oh, that sounds absolutely terrible. I do think having Hux as the leaker sounds a little bit strange. I know he doesn't like Kylo Ren. Maybe that's going to be the explanation as to why he's actually turned on him. But that does stick out a little bit to me. And obviously, the explanation of how the Emperor is still alive, how he got away, and so on, if that is in the movie, as it sort of says here it is, how is that going to work? I think that's a bit of a weak point as well. That's going to have to be fairly well explained to actually be plausible. I don't particularly like Luke and Leia coming back as Force Ghosts to help, only because the other Force Ghosts never helped before. Okay, why didn't Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda help out Luke when he was confronting Vader and the Emperor the first time? So making another sort of new precedent here, oh look, Force Ghosts can do this kind of stuff, I think that's a bit of a problem if it happens. And also, if it happens the way that this outlined, in that they appear after Ben Solo dies, that's pretty weak, that they don't actually help Ben Solo. They only pop up finally to actually help Rey. The other sticking point, I suppose, is will they have an explanation as to why they don't just hyperspace into this fleet that they're trying to destroy at the end of the movie, or the particular one ship, the command ship, because obviously they show that you can just hyperspace into a ship and destroy it in The Last Jedi. So will there be some sort of explanation as to why they can't do that, or are they just going to pretend it never happened? Because I think that's going to be another big sticking point. So we'll see over the next couple of months as to whether or not there's more information released that confirms these details, or if there's more information released that contradicts these details, but only time will tell. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.